Gather round, children. Clean thy feet. Get comfortable, for I'm about to read thee a tale of whatever the fuck comes next. Where were we? I don't know. It was the lion's den. Maggie sat on the bench beside the house. Dust fingers, blah, 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 blah. Right, Dustfinger had just shown up. Told them that they knew where to find Mo. He told her, like, Eleanor and Maggie, that he knew where to find Mo. Eleanor doesn't trust Dustfinger. She thinks that he's, like, being all treacherous, which, you know, seems pretty treacherous, right? What the fuck's up with him? Chapter 11 is called A Coward. I need some lip balm and a drink before I really dive into our shit here. Okay. Where's my lip balm? Well, fuck. Okay. That's not gonna bother me the whole time I'm reading. No, never. Alright, chapter 11. Y'all, A Coward. That's what this one's called. The prequel excerpt thingy that I told you all about. Yeah, ready again. We're starting now for real. Is from... I'll have to take this out while I read. Shit, I'm sleepy. Okay. It's from The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. Says, where's my mic? Okay, we got it. Home. That was what they meant. Those caressing appeals. Those soft touches wafted through the air. Those invisible little hands pulling and tugging all one way. Okay. I don't know what kind of a prequel or foreshadowing that's supposed to be, but it's supposed to be something important. Y'all got it? Y'all got that? Dustfinger did not steal into Maggie's room until he was quite sure she was asleep. She had locked her door. Undoubtedly, Eleanor had persuaded her to do that because she didn't trust him and because Maggie had refused to give Inkheart back to her. Dustfinger couldn't help smiling as he inserted the thin wire into the lock. What a stupid woman she was. An ordinary lock was... Did she really think... What the fuck? I think I skipped the whole thing. What a stupid woman she was, in spite of all those books she'd read. Did she really think such an ordinary lock was any obstacle? Well, perhaps it might be for fat fingers like yours, Eleanor, he whispered to himself as he opened the door. But my fingers play with fire, and it's made them quick and skillful. His liking for Silvertongue's daughter was a more serious obstacle, and his guilty conscience didn't make matters any easier. Yes, Dustfinger did have a guilty conscience as he crept into Maggie's room, although he hadn't come to steal the book. Naturally, Capricorn still wanted it, the book and Silvertongue's daughter too. Those were his new orders. But that must wait. Tonight, Dustfinger was here for a different reason. Tonight, something that had been gnawing at his heart for years drove him into Maggie's room. He stood thoughtfully beside the bed, looking at the sleeping girl. Betraying her father to Capricorn had not been particularly difficult. What a snake, am I right? Apologize for my commentary. But with her, it would be different. Her face reminded Dustfinger of another one, although no grief had yet left dark shadows on Maggie's childish features. Strange. Every time the girl looked at him, he felt a wish to show her that he didn't deserve the distrust he always saw in her eyes, even when she was smiling at him. She looked at her father in a very different way, as if he could protect her from all the dark and evil in the world. What a stupid, stupid idea. No one would be able to protect her from that. Dustfinger stroked the scars on his face and frowned. Enough of such useless thoughts. He would bring Capricorn what he wanted, the girl in the book, but not tonight. Gwen moved on his shoulder, trying to wriggle out of his collar, which he liked as little as he liked the dog's leash Dustfinger always carried him with. He wanted to go hunting, but Dustfinger wasn't letting him out. Last night, the marten had run away from him while he was talking to Basta. The furry little devil was still afraid of Basta. Dustfinger couldn't blame him. Meggie was sleeping soundly, her face buried in a gray sweater, probably her father's. She murmured something in her sleep, but Dustfinger couldn't make out what. Once again, his guilty conscience stirred, but he pushed the tiresome feeling away. He couldn't do that with this kind of thing. Not now and not later. The girl was nothing to do with him, and he was quits with her father now. Yes, quits. He had no reason to feel like a miserable, double-dealing villain. He looked around the dark room in search of something. Where would Meggie put the book? There was a red box beside her bed. Dustfinger lifted the lid. Gwen's chain clinked softly as he leaned forward. The box was full of books. Wonderful books. Dustfinger took out the flashlight from under his coat and shone it on them. Look at that, he murmured. What beauties. Like a party of ladies dressed in their best to go to a prince's ball. Silvertongue had probably rebound them after Maggie's little fingers had worn out the old bindings. Yes, of course, there was his sign, the unicorn's head. Each book bore it, and each was bound in a different color. All the hues of the rainbow were gathered together in that box. The book Dustfinger was looking for was right in the bottom, with its silvery green binding, and it looked plain, a poor thing among all the other grand and lordly volumes. It didn't surprise Dustfinger that, oh, I've got dry-ass eyes. I wonder why. Weed. Shit. It didn't surprise Dustfinger that Silvertongue had given this book such a plain dress to wear. Very likely Maggie's father hated it as much as he loved it. Dustfinger carefully extracted it from the other books. It was almost 9 years since he had last had it in his hands. At the time, it still had a cardboard binding and a torn paper dust jacket. Dustfinger raised his head. Maggie sighed and moved until her sleeping face was turned his way. How unhappy she looked. She must be having a nightmare. Her lips quivered and her hands clutched the sweater as if she was looking for something or someone to give her security. But you are usually alone in nightmares, dreadfully alone. Dustfinger remembered many of his own bad dreams, and for a moment he was tempted to put his hand out and wake Maggie. But a soft-hearted fool he was. He turned his back to the bed, out of sight, out of mind. Then he opened the book hastily before he could think better of it. His breathing was heavy, as if he had filled his mouth with liquid in preparation for breathing fire. He leafed through the first few pages and began to read, slowly turning page after page after page, but with every page his finger hesitated a little longer, till suddenly he closed the book. Moonlight was seeping through the cracks in the shutters. He had no idea how long he had been standing there, his eyes lost in the labyrinth of letters. He had always been a very slow reader. Coward, he whispered. Oh, what a coward you are, Dustfinger. He bit his lips until they hurt. Come on, he told himself. This may be your last chance, you fool. Once Capricorn has the book, he'll never let you look at it again. Once more he opened the book, leafed rapidly through to about the middle, and closed it again, with a sound loud enough to make Maggie give a little start in her sleep and bury her head under the covers. Dustfinger waited motionless beside the bed until she was breathing regularly again, then leaned over her treasure chest with a deep sigh and put the book back under the others. Soundlessly, he closed the lid. Did you see that, Gwen? He whispered to the marten. I just dare not look. Wouldn't you rather find a braver master? Think it over. Gwen chattered softly in his ear, but if that was an answer, Dustfinger didn't understand it. Oh, that's a cricket. I kept thinking I'm like hearing something weird and like tiny in my cave, and it's fucking cricket. I need another drink. I'm fucking thirsty. For a moment, he went on listening to Maggie's quiet breathing, then stole back to the door. Well, what does it matter, he muttered when he was out in the corridor. Who wants to know the end of the story in advance? He climbed up to the attic bedroom Eleanor had given him and lay down on the narrow bed with the crates of books towering around it. But he could not sleep until morning came. The road... This is the start of a new chapter, and it's another excerpt. So, I think we're changing point of view again to... I don't know who. But we're on chapter 12 already, page 101. This excerpt, foreshadowing whatever the fuck is from Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with wary feet until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet, and whither then I cannot say. Going further south. After breakfast the next morning, Eleanor spread a crumpled road map out on the kitchen table. Right, 300 kilometers south of here, she said, with a wary glance at Dustfinger. So show us exactly where we have to look for Maggie's father. Maggie looked at Dustfinger, her heart thudding. There were I think I have hiccups. Dark shadows around his eyes, as if he had slept very badly. Fuck. Hesitantly, he came over to the table, rubbing his stubbly chin. Okay, seriously? Hesitantly, he came over to the table, rubbing his stubbly chin. He bent over the map, scrutinized it for what seemed an eternity, and finally pointed with his finger. There, he said. Capricorn's village is right there. Are you guys comfy? Because I'm, like, not. I don't know. I'm losing my comfy. I don't know which way I need to fucking be here. And this way? This feels weird. This doesn't feel right to be over here. I don't know about this. Eleanor looked over his shoulder. Liguria, she said. Aha. And what is the name of this village, if I may ask? Capricornia. She was examining Dustfinger's face as if tracing his scars with her eyes. It doesn't have a name. Dustfinger responded to her gaze with unconcealed dislike. I expected it had one once, but the name was already forgotten before Capricorn settled there. You won't find it on this map or any other either. To the rest of the world, the village is just a collection of tumble-down houses along what can hardly be called a road. Eleanor bent closer to the map. I've never been in that region. I was in Genoa once. Jacket, thanks for the gifted sub. Genoa? Where the fuck was that word? I bought a very fine edition of Alice in Wonderland there, in good condition and for half of what it was worth. She looked inquiringly at Maggie. God, I can't fucking talk with these stupid aligners in, I swear. It makes me feel like I'm talking with like peanut butter and floss in my mouth. It's just annoying. She looked inquiringly at Maggie. Do you like Alice in Wonderland? Not particularly, said Maggie, staring at the map. Eleanor shook her head in such a childish folly and turned back to Dustfinger. What does this Capricorn do when he's not stealing books and abducting people's fathers, she asked. If I understand Maggie correctly, you know him pretty well. Dustfinger avoided her eyes and ran his fingers along a blue river winding its way through the green and pale brown of the map. We come from the same place, he said, but apart from that, we don't have much in common. Eleanor looked at him so penetratingly that Maggie wouldn't have been surprised to see a hole suddenly appear in his forehead. There's one thing that strikes me as strange, Eleanor said. Maggie's father wanted to keep Inkheart safe from this particular Capricorn, so why bring the book here to me? He was practically running into Capricorn's arms. Dustfinger shrugged his shoulders. Well, just thought your library would be the safest hiding place. A memory stirred in Maggie's mind. At first, she couldn't identify it, but then it all came flooding back to her. Perfectly clearly, as vivid as a picture in a book. She saw Dustfinger standing beside the camper van at the gate of the farmhouse, and it was almost as if she heard his voice again. She looked at him in horror. "You told Mo that Capricorn was in the north," she said. "He specially asked, and you were sure of it." Dustfinger examined his fingernails. "Well, yes, that's right," he admitted without looking at Maggie or Eleanor. He just went on staring at his nails. Finally, he rubbed them on a sweater as if to remove an ugly mark. "You don't trust me," he said hoarsely, still without looking at them. "Neither of you trust me. I can understand that, but I wasn't lying." Capricorn has 2 main headquarters and several smaller hideouts in case things get too hot for him, or one of his men needs to disappear for a while. He usually spends the summer months in the north and doesn't come south until October, but this year he's obviously spending the summer down in the south. How would I know why? Perhaps he had trouble with the police in the north. Perhaps he has business of some kind in the south and wants to see to it personally. His voice sounded injured, like the voice of a child unjustly accused. In any case, his men drove south with Maggie's father. I saw them go myself. And when Capricorn is in the south, he always does anything of importance in that village. He feels safe in it, safer than anywhere else. He's never had any trouble with the police there. He can act like a king, as if the whole world belonged to him. He makes the laws. He decides what happens. He can do or not do anything he likes. His men take care of that. Believe you me, I understand these things. Dustfinger smiled. It was a bitter smile. It seemed to be saying, if only you knew, but you don't know anything. You don't understand anything. Maggie felt unease spread through her again. It was not caused by what Dustfinger said, but by what he wasn't saying. Nothing is more frightening than a fear you cannot name. Ow! What the hell? Huh. Eleanor seemed to be feeling the same. "For heaven's sake, don't make such a mystery of it," she snapped. "I'm asking you again, what does this Capricorn do? How does he earn his money?" Dustfinger crossed his arms. "You won't get any more information out of me. Ask him yourself." Even taking you to his village could cost me dearly, so I am going to tell you about Capricorn's business. Not likely." He shook his head. "I warned Maggie's father. I advised him to bring Capricorn to the book of his own free will, but he wouldn't listen. If I hadn't warned him, Capricorn's men would have found him much sooner. Ask Maggie. She was there when I warned him." "Okay, I didn't tell him everything I knew. So what? I talk about Capricorn as little as possible. I try not to even think of him, and if you take my word for it, once you know him, you'll feel the same." Eleanor wrinkled her nose as if such an idea was too ridiculous for her to waste a single word on it. "So I assume you can't tell me why he's so keen to get a hold of this book?" she asked, folding up the road map. "Is he some kind of collector?" Ah! Why does that scare me every time? Jacket, thanks for gifting. Great reading. I'm really fucking butchering it today, honestly. Ah! I blame the new retainer. Sore teeth. Feels weird. Feels weird, man. Okay, am I comfy? How was I sitting like this? I don't remember. I don't remember where I was here. Dustfinger ran his finger along the edge of a table. "All I'm going to tell you is that he wants this book, and that's why you'd better give it to him. Once I knew his men to stand outside a man's house for 4 nights running just because Capricorn took a fancy to the man's dog." "Did he get the dog?" asked Maggie quietly. "Of course," replied Dustfinger, looking at her thoughtfully. "Believe me, no one sleeps soundly with Capricorn's men standing outside the door looking up at their window. Or their children's window. Capricorn usually gets what he wants within a couple of days maximum." "Disgusting," said Eleanor. "He wouldn't have gotten my dog." Dustfinger examined his fingernails again, smiling. "Stop grinning like that," snapped Eleanor, and turning to Maggie, she added, "You better pack a few things. We set off within the hour." It's about time you got your father back. Even if I don't like having to leave the book with this capper what's-his-name, I hate to see books fall into the wrong hands. They were going to Eleanor's car, although Dustfinger would have preferred to travel in Moe's camper van. Nonsense. I've never driven anything like that, said Eleanor, dumping in Dustfinger's arms a cardboard box full of provisions for the journey. Anyway, Mortimer's locked the van. Maggie saw that Dustfinger had an answer on the tip of his tongue, but he chose to keep it to himself. Suppose we have to spend the night somewhere, he asked, carrying the box over to Eleanor's car. Heavens above, who said anything about that? I intend to be back here tomorrow morning at the latest. I hate leaving my books on their own for more than a day. Oh, Eleanor, with your expectations. Dustfinger rolled his eyes up at the sky as if more sense might be expected there than in Eleanor's head, and began clambering into the back seat, but Eleanor stopped him. No, wait, you'd better drive, she said, handing him her car keys. You're the one who knows where we're going. But Dustfinger gave her back the keys. I can't drive, he said. It's bad enough sitting in a car, never mind driving it. Eleanor got behind the steering wheel, shaking her head. Well, you're an oddity and no mistake, she said as Maggie climbed into the passenger seat behind her. And I hope you really do know where Maggie's father is, or you'll find out that this Capricorn of yours isn't the only person to be frightened of around here. Maggie rolled her window down as Eleanor started the engine. She looked back at Moe's van. It felt bad leaving it behind here, worse than leaving a house, even this one. It's getting fucking sunny. It's touching me. Trying to cook me. Okay, you guys still charging? Everybody good? Strange as the place that might be, the camper van meant that Moe and she had always had a bit of home with them. Now that was gone too, and nothing familiar anymore except the clothes in her traveling bag in the trunk of Eleanor's car. She had also packed a few things for Moe and 2 of her books. Interesting choice, Eleanor had commented when she lent Maggie a bag for the books, an old-fashioned one made of dark leather that you could sling over your shoulder. These stories about the ill-made night and people with hairy feet going on a long journey to dark places. Have you read them both? Maggie had nodded. Lots of times. She smiled at Eleanor's descriptions, stroking the bindings before she put the books in the bag. She could remember every detail of the day when Moe had rebound them. Oh dear, don't look so dismal, Eleanor had said, looking at her with concern. You just wait. Our journey isn't going to be half as bad as those hairy-footed people's quest. It will be much shorter, too. Maggie would have been glad to feel as sure of that herself. The book was the reason for their journey. The book was the reason for their own journey was in the trunk, under the spare tire. What? I feel like I'm reading that wrong. The book that was the reason. Fuck, guys, I'm struggling today. The book that was the reason for their own journey was in the trunk, under the spare tire. Eleanor had put it in a plastic bag. Don't let Dustfinger see where it is, she urged Maggie before putting it into her hands. I still don't trust him. But Maggie had decided to trust Dustfinger. She wanted to trust him, and she needed to trust him. Who else could lead her to Moe? Chapter 13. Capricorn's Village. This excerpt is from Naphtali the storyteller and his horse, Suze. I think that's how you say that. But to the last question, fucking hell. But to the last question, Zelig replied, he probably flew to beyond the dark regions, where people don't go and cattle don't stray, where the sky is copper, the earth iron, and where the evil forces live under roofs of petrified toadstools and in tunnels abandoned by moles. Okay. Shit. The sun was already high in the cloudless sky when they set off. Soon the air was so hot and muggy in Eleanor's car that Maggie's t-shirt was sticking to her skin with sweat. Eleanor opened her window and passed a bottle of water around. She herself was wearing a knitted jacket buttoned up to her chin, and when Maggie wasn't thinking of Mo or Capricorn, she wondered whether Eleanor might melt away inside it. Dustfinger sat in the back seat, so silent you could almost have forgotten he was there. He put Gwen on his lap. The Martin slept with Dustfinger's hands restlessly stroked his... While Dustfinger's hands restlessly stroked his fur, passing over it again and again. Now and then, Maggie took a look at him. He was usually gazing out of the window indifferently, as if he were looking straight through the mountains and trees, houses, and rolling by outside. His expression seemed perfectly empty, as if he were thinking of something far away, and once, when Maggie glanced around, there was such sadness on his scarred face that she quickly turned to look out of the windshield ahead of her. She would have liked to have an animal in her own lap during this long, long journey. Perhaps it would have driven away the dark thoughts that insisted on coming into her mind. Outside, the world was a place of gently unfolding mountains rising higher and higher. Sometimes it seemed as if they would crush the road between their gray and rocky sides, but worse than the mountains were the tunnels. Pictures seemed to lurk in them that not even Gwen's warm body could have kept at bay. They seemed to be hiding there in the darkness, waiting for Maggie. Pictures of Mo in some grim, cold place, and of Capricorn. Maggie knew it must be Capricorn, although his face was different every time. She tried reading for a while, but soon noticed that she wasn't taking in a world of what she read, so she gave it up and stared out of the window like Dustfinger. Eleanor chose minor roads without much traffic on them. Otherwise, the driving gets so boring, she said. It makes no difference to Maggie. She just wanted to arrive. She looked impatiently at the mountains and the houses where other people lived. Sometimes through the window of a car coming the other way, she caught a glimpse of a stranger's face, then it was gone, like a book you open and then close at once. When they were driving through one of the villages, she saw a man by the roadside sticking a Band-Aid on the grazed knee of a tearful little girl. He was stroking her hair comfortingly, and Maggie couldn't help remembering how often Mo had done that for her. He sometimes chased all around the house. He sometimes chased her all around the house, cursing when he couldn't find a Band-Aid in time. The memory brought tears to her eyes. "Heavens above, it's quieter in here than a pharaoh's burial chamber," said Eleanor at some point. Maggie thought she said heavens above quite a lot. "Couldn't one of you at least say something now and then? Oh, what a lovely landscape, for instance, or, oh, that's a very fine castle. If you keep as deathly quiet as this, I'll be falling asleep at the wheel any minute now." She still hadn't undone a single button of her knitted jacket. I need some more fucking, lip balm. Where's it at? Y'all enjoying the story? Damn, my internet just went like dead for a sec. It's almost gone, guys. I need some more. It lasted me a good minute. Okay. Rattly. Eee. Okay. "I don't see any castle," muttered Maggie, but it wasn't long before Eleanor spotted one. "16th century," she announced as the ruined walls appeared on the mountainside. I need to sneeze. Where's it at? It's not gonna come out. That's really lame. Help. Oh, shit. Okay. Tragic story, forbidden love, pursuit, death, grief, and pain. As they passed between the strong and silent rocks, Eleanor told the tale of a battle that had raged in this very place over 600 years ago. To this day, if you dig among the stones, you'll still find bones and dented helmets. She seemed to know a story about every church tower. Some were so unlikely that Maggie wrinkled her brow in disbelief. Okay, seriously? And Eleanor, without taking her eyes off the road, always responded, "No, really, that's what happened." Okay, seriously, where is it? Is it in my piercing? Da 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 da. I can only feel it when I start talking. Okay, shit. Fucking hell. To this day, if you dig among the stones, you'll find bones and dented helmets. She seemed to know a story about every church tower. Some were so unlikely that Maggie wrinkled her brow in disbelief, and Eleanor, without taking her eyes off the road, always responded, "No, really, that's just what happened." She seemed to be particularly fond of bloodthirsty stories, tales of the beheadings of unhappy lovers or princes walled up alive. "Yes, everything looks very peaceful now," she remarked when Maggie turned a little pale at one of these stories. "But I can tell you there's always a sad story somewhere." Ah, well, times were more exciting a few hundred years ago. Maggie didn't know what was so exciting about times when, if Eleanor was to be believed, your only choice was between dying of a plague or getting slaughtered by invading soldiers. But Eleanor's cheeks glowed pink with excitement at the sight of some burnt-out old castle, and whenever she told tales of warrior princes and greedy bishops who had once spread terror and death abroad in the very mountains through which they were now driving on modern paved roads, a romantic gleam lit her usually chilly pebble eyes. "My dear Eleanor, you were obviously born into the wrong story," said Dustfinger at last. These were the first words he had spoken since they set out. "The wrong story? The wrong period, you mean? Yes, I've often thought so myself." "Call it what you like," said Dustfinger. "Anyway, you should get along well with Capricorn. He likes the same kinds of stories as you." "Is that supposed to be an insult?" asked Eleanor, offended. The comparison seemed to trouble her, for after that she kept quiet for almost an hour, which left Maggie with nothing to distract her from her miserable thoughts and the frightening pictures they conjured up for her in every tunnel. Twilight was beginning to fall when the mountains drew back from the road, and the sea suddenly appeared beyond the green hills. A sea as wide as another sky. The sinking sun made it glisten like the skin of a beautiful snake. It was a long time since Maggie had seen the sea, and it had been a cold sea, slate gray and pale from the wind. This sea looked different, very different. It warmed Maggie's heart just to see it, but all too often it disappeared behind the tall, ugly buildings covering the narrow strip of land that lay between the water and the encroaching hills. Sometimes the hills reached all the way down to the sea, and in the light of the setting sun they looked like giant waves that had rolled up onto the land. As they followed the winding coastal road, Eleanor began telling stories again. Tales of the Romans who, she said, had built the roads they were on and how they feared the savage inhabitants of this narrow strip of land. Maggie was only half listening. Palm trees grew beside the road, their fronds dusty and sharp-edged. Giant agaves flowered among the palms, looking like spiders squatting there with their long spiny leaves. The light behind them turned pink and lemon yellow as the sun sank further down toward the sea, and dark blue trickled from the sky like ink flowing into the water. It was so beautiful a sight that it almost hurt to look at it. Ugh. Maggie had thought the place where Capricorn lived would be quite different. Beauty and fear make uneasy companions. They drove through a small town, past houses as bright as if a child had painted them. They were color-washed orange and pink, red, and yellow. A great many were yellow, pale yellow, brownish yellow, sandy yellow, dirty yellow, and they had green shutters and red-brown roofs. Even the gathering twilight couldn't drain them of their brightness. "It doesn't seem so very dangerous here," remarked Maggie as they drove past another pink house. "That's because you keep looking to your left," said Dustfinger behind her. "But there's always a light side and a dark side. Look to your right for a change." Maggie did as he said. At first she saw nothing but the brightly colored houses there too. They crowded close to the roadside, leaning against each other as if they were arm in arm. But then the houses were suddenly left behind. Steep hills with the night already settling among their folds lined the road instead. Yes, Dustfinger was right. It looked sinister over there, and the few houses seemed to be drowning in the gathering dusk. It quickly grew darker, for night falls in the south For night falls fast in the south, and Maggie was glad that Eleanor was driving along the well-lit coastal road. But all too soon, Dustfinger told her to turn off along a minor road leading away from the coast, away from the sea and the brightly colored houses, and into the dark. The road wound further and further into the hills, going up and down as the slopes by the roadside grew steeper and steeper. The light of the headlights fell on brambles, on vines run wild, and on olive trees crouching like bent old men beside the road. Only twice did they meet another vehicle coming toward them. Now and then the lights of the village emerged from the darkness, but the roads along which Dustfinger guided Eleanor led away from the lights and deeper into the night. Several times the beams of the headlights fell on ruined houses, but Eleanor didn't know stories about any of them. No princes had lived in those wretched hovels, no red-robed bishops, only farmers and laborers whose stories no one had written down, and now they were lost, buried under wild thyme and fast-growing spurge. "Are we still going the right way?" asked Eleanor in a muted voice, as if the world around her were too quiet for anyone to speak out loud. "Where on earth do we find a village in this god-forsaken wilderness?" "We've probably taken at least 2 wrong turns already." But Dustfinger only shook his head. "We're going the right way," he replied, "and once we're over that hill, you'll be able to see houses." "I certainly hope so," muttered Eleanor. "I can hardly make out the road. Heavens above, I had no idea anywhere in the world was still so dark. Couldn't you have told me what a long way it was? Then I'd have filled up the tank again. I don't even know if we have enough gas to make it back to the coast." "So whose car is this?" Dustfinger snapped back. "Mine? I told you I don't know the first thing about cars. Now keep your eyes on the road. We'll be coming to the bridge any moment." Bridge. Eleanor drove around the next bend and suddenly stamped on the brake. Right across the road, lit by 2 floodlights, was a metal barrier. It looked rusty, as if it had stood there for years. "There," Eleanor said, clapping her hands on the steering wheel. "We have gone the wrong way. I told you so." "No, we haven't." Dustfinger took Gwen off his shoulder and got out of the car. He looked around, listening intently as he approached the barrier, then dragged it over to the side of the road. Eleanor's look of disbelief almost made Maggie laugh out loud. "Has the man gone right out of his mind?" she whispered. "He doesn't think I'm going to drive down a closed road in this darkness, does he?" I need a fucking drink. Shit. It's so hot in here. Shit. Okay. I don't know how I want to sit. I think this is fine. My back's getting tired. All the same, she started the engine when Dustfinger impatiently waved her on. As soon as she was past him, he pulled the barrier back across the road. "No need to look at me like that," he said, climbing back into the car. "That barrier is always there. Capricorn had it put up to keep unwanted visitors away. Not that people often venture up here. Capricorn spreads stories around the village that keep most of them at a distance, but..." "What sort of stories?" Maggie interrupted him, although she didn't really look like she wanted to know. "Blood-curdling stories," said Dustfinger. "Like most folk, the locals around here are very superstitious. The most common tale is that the devil himself lives on the far side of that hill." Maggie was angry with herself for being scared, but now she just couldn't take her eyes off the dark hilltop. "Most says human beings invented the devil," she said. "Well, maybe." Dustfinger's mysterious smile was still hovering around his mouth again. "But you wanted to know about the stories. They say no bullet can kill the men who live in that village. They can walk through walls. They can kidnap 3 boys every month when the moon is new. And Capricorn teaches them to commit theft, arson, and murder." Good heavens, who thought all that up? The folk in these parts, or this man Capricorn himself? Eleanor was leaning right over the steering wheel. The road was full of potholes, and she had to drive very slowly as not to get stuck. "Both." Dustfinger leaned back and let Gwen nibble his fingers. "Capricorn rewards people who think up new stories. This One man who never joins in that game is Basta. He's so superstitious himself, he even goes out of his way to avoid black cats. Basta. Maggie remembered the name, but before she could ask any more questions, Dustfinger was speaking again. He seemed to enjoy telling these tales. Oh yes, I almost forgot. Everyone living in the village of the damned has the evil eye, even the women. The evil eye? Maggie looked at him. That's right, one glance and you fall mortally ill. 3 days after that, at the latest, and you're dead as a doornail. Who'd believe a thing like that, murmured Maggie. Hey, get off me. Idiots would. Eleanor stamped on the brake again. The car skidded over gravel on the road. The bridge Dustfinger had mentioned lay ahead, its gray stone pale in the headlights. Go on, said Dustfinger impatiently. It'll hold, though you might not think so. It looks as if the ancient Romans built it, muttered Eleanor, but for donkeys, not cars. All the same, Eleanor drove on. Maggie squeezed her eyes shut tight and didn't open them until she could hear the gravel under the car tires once more. Capricorn likes this bridge a lot, said Dustfinger quietly. A single well-armed man is enough to make it impassable, but luckily he's here every night. Dustfinger, Maggie turned hesitantly to look at him as Eleanor's car labored up the last hill. What are we going to say when they ask us how we found the village? I mean, it's not going to be a good idea for Capricorn to know that you showed us the way, is it? No, you're right, muttered Dustfinger, avoiding Maggie's eyes. Although we're bringing him the book, he picked up Gwen, who was clambering around the back seat, held him so that he couldn't snap, and lured him into the backpack with a piece of bread. The Martin had been restless ever since darkness fell. He wanted to go hunting. They had reached the top of the hill. The world around them had disappeared from view, swallowed up by the night. But not far away, a few pale rectangles glowed in the dark. Lighted windows. I feel like it's just bad writing, and maybe it's not me. Maybe I don't suck. Maybe the writing just isn't the best. No, I'm butchering it though. Either way, fuck. There it is, said Dustfinger. Capricorn's village, or the Devil's village if you prefer. He laughed softly. Eleanor turned to him crossly. For heaven's sake, will you stop that? She snapped at him. You really seem to like these stories. Who knows, perhaps they're all your own invention, and this Capricorn is just a rare, rather eccentric book collector. Dustfinger made no reply, but only looked out of the window with a strange smile that Maggie sometimes wanted to wipe off his face. Yet again, it seemed to be saying, how stupid you two are. Eleanor had switched off the engine. The silence surrounding them was so absolute that Maggie hardly dared to breathe. She looked down at the lighted windows. Usually she thought brightly lit windows were an inviting sight in the dark, but these seemed far more menacing than the darkness all around. Does this village have any normal inhabitants? Asked Eleanor. Harmless old grannies, children, people who don't have anything to do with Capricorn? No, nobody lives here but Capricorn and his men, whispered Dustfinger, and the women who cook and clean and so on for them. And so on. Oh, wonderful. Eleanor snorted with distaste. I like the sound of this Capricorn less and less. Okay, let's get this over and done with. I want to go home to my books, real electric light, and a nice cup of coffee. Really? I thought you were longing for a little adventure. If Gwen could speak, thought Maggie, he'd do it in Dustfinger's voice. What time is it? 4:30? We read okay. I prefer adventures in the sunlight, replied Eleanor curtly. Heavens, how I hate this darkness. Still, if we sit around here till dawn, my books will be mildewed before Mortimer can do anything about them. Maggie, go around to the back of the car and get that bag. You know the one. Maggie nodded and was just about to open the passenger door when a glaring light blinded her. Someone whose face she couldn't make out was standing beside the driver door, shining a flashlight into the car. He tapped it commandingly against the pane. Well, she looks fucking lazy. Comfy as a heck. Her snort, whatever you call that. Sigh. Eleanor jumped in such alarm she hit her knee on the steering wheel, but she quickly pulled herself together. Cursing, she rubbed her hurt leg and opened the window. "What's the idea?" she snapped at the stranger. "Do you have to frighten us to death? A person could easily get run over skulking around in the dark like that." By way of answer, the stranger pushed the barrel of a shotgun through the open window. "This is private property," he said. Maggie thought that she recognized the rasping cat-tongue voice from Eleanor's library, and a person can easily get shot trespassing on private property at night. "I can explain." Dustfinger leaned over Eleanor's shoulder. Well, well, who have we here if it isn't Dustfinger?" The man withdrew the barrel of his gun. "Do you have to turn up in the middle of the night?" Eleanor turned and cast Dustfinger a glance that was more than suspicious. "I'd no idea you were on such friendly terms with these people," she commented. "You'd call them devils." But Dustfinger was already out of the car, and Maggie didn't like the familiar way the two men were talking. She remembered exactly what Dustfinger had said to her about Capricorn's men. How could he talk to one of them like this? Oh, shit. However hard Maggie strained her ears, she couldn't make out what the pair was saying. She caught only one thing. Dustfinger called the stranger Basta. "I don't like this," whispered. "Matchstick-eating friend can come and go here as he likes." "He probably knows they won't hurt him because we're bringing him the book," Maggie whispered back, never taking her eyes off the two men. The stranger had a couple of dogs with him. German shepherds. They were sniffing at Dustfinger's hands and nuzzling him in the ribs, wagging their tails. "See that?" hissed Eleanor. "Even those dogs treat him like an old friend. Suppose..." But before she could say any more, Basta opened the driver's door. "Get out, both of you," he ordered. Reluctantly, Eleanor swung her legs out of the car. Maggie got out too and stood beside her. Her heart was thudding. She had never seen a man with a gun before. "Well, on TV she had, but not in real life." "Look, I don't like your tone," Eleanor informed Basta. "We had a strenuous drive, and we only came to this godforsaken spot to bring your boss, or whatever you call him, something he's been wanting for a long time. So let's have a little more civility." Basta cast her such a scornful glance that Eleanor drew in a sharp breath, and Maggie involuntarily squeezed her hand. "Where did you pick her up?" inquired Basta, turning back to Dustfinger, who was standing there looking as unmoved as if none of this had anything at all to do with him. "She owns that house. You know the one I mean." Dustfinger had lowered his voice, but Maggie heard him all the same. "I didn't want to bring her, but she insisted." "I can imagine that." Basta scrutinized Eleanor once again, then turned to Maggie. "So this is Silvertongue's little daughter. Doesn't look much like him." "Where's my father?" asked Maggie. "How is he?" These were the first words she had managed to utter. Guys, I'm getting tired. Why does fucking coffee make me sleepy? Like, every time I drink it, I just start yawning and yawning. Why does it look like a shark out there? I miss the ocean. This river is not cutting it. "Oh, he's fine," replied Basta, glancing at Dustfinger. "Although he's saying so little at the moment that Leaden Tongue would be more like it." Maggie bit her lip. "We've come for him," she said. Now her voice was high and thin, although she was trying as hard as she could to sound grown up. "We have the book, but we won't give it to Capricorn unless he lets my father go." Basta turned to Dustfinger again. "Something about her does remind me of her father after all. See her lips tighten? And that look. Oh yes, anyone can see they're related." Where the hell? Oh my god. Where the hell? Oh, it's over here? I thought it was on this page. His voice sounded as if he were joking, but there was nothing funny about his face when he looked at Maggie again. It was thin, sharply angular, with close-set eyes. He narrowed them slightly as if he could see better that way. Basta was not a tall man, and his shoulders were almost as narrow as a boy's. But Maggie held her breath when he took a step toward her. She was afraid of him. She had never been so afraid of anyone before, and it wasn't because of the shotgun in his hand. He had an aura of fury about him. God. Of something keen and biting. Maggie, get the bag out of the trunk. As Basta was about to grab Maggie, Eleanor pushed herself between them. There's nothing dangerous in it, she said crossly. Just what we came here to hand over. By way of answer, Basta pulled the dogs aside, yanking on their leashes so harshly that they yowled. Maggie, listen to me, whispered Eleanor as they left the car and followed Basta down a steep pathway leading to the lighted windows. Don't hand over the book until they let us see your father, understand? Maggie nodded, clutching the plastic bag firmly to her chest. How stupid did Eleanor think she was? On the other hand, how was she going to hang on to the book if Basta decided to take it away from her? She preferred not to follow this line of thinking through to its conclusion. It was a hot, sultry night. The sky above the black hills was sprinkled with stars. Hitting them was stony and so dark that Maggie could hardly see her own feet. But whenever she stumbled, there was a hand to catch her. The hand belonged to Eleanor walking beside her, or to Dustfinger, who was following as silently as if he were her shadow. It's like I just keep reading ahead and saying it out loud while my brain's reading it, and they're not on track. My brain and my eyes. I don't know how long I've been reading so far, really. Oh, shit. Okay. Gwen was still in his backpack, and Basta's dogs kept raising their noses and sniffing as if they had picked up the sharp scent of the marten. Slowly, they came closer to the lighted windows. Maggie saw old houses of gray, rough-hewn stone. Rough-hewn stone with a pale church tower rising above the rooftops. Many of the houses looked empty as they passed, going down alleys so narrow that Maggie felt they could close in on her. Some of the houses had no roofs, others were little more than a couple of walls, partly fallen in. It was dark in Capricorn's village. Only a few lamps were on in the streets, hanging from the masonry arches above the alleyways. At last they reached a small square. The church with the tower they had seen from a distance stood on one side of the square, and not far away, divided from it by a narrow hallway, there was a large two-story house, which did not look at all derelict. The square was better lit than the rest of the village, with 4 lanterns casting menacing shadows on the paving stones. Basta led them straight to the big house, where more light showed behind 3 windows on the upper floor. Was Moen there? Maggie listened to herself as if she could find the answer there, but all her heart would tell her was a tale of fear and grief. Man. I don't know, I think I'm about to be done reading for a minute, because I'm like sucking at it today. And I'm really hot right now. I'm gonna turn the air on. Damn, it smells kind of like weed in here.